So I'm Sarah Tester and I'm the Community Collections and Outreach Archivist working for Explore York Libraries and Archives. I'm going to talk to you today about our Gateway to History project and how that is informing how we're doing community engagement as a service as well. So first of all, I should probably tell you exactly what York Gateway to History actually is as a project. It's a project that's Heritage Lottery funded, supported by City of York Council, but delivered by Explore Libraries and Archives. Sounds like a bit of a mouthful, but Explore Libraries and Archives is now a spin-out of City of York Council. We're a community-led mutual, so that does feed into how we're doing community engagement as well. The Gateway to History project is creating a 21st century archive for York. And most of the money that we've been awarded by the Heritage Lottery Fund has been spent on capital works. We're nearing the end of that programme of work now, and our library is due to open on the 5th of January. But the major difference is we're actually going to have a proper archive service for the first time in the city, and it's going to be part of the main York Explore library, which is in the centre of York. So what we've done is we've got a box that's gone on the back of the listed library building, and that is to house all the archive materials for York as well. So everything will be on site for us to use. We're also going to have a reading room where people can actually come view those archives, a huge local history space, as well as a family history and collaboration area as well. So that is a very physical way in which we can get people engaging and getting involved and using the spaces. And being part of a public library service as well means that people are actually going to be able to use archives in what is already a very public community-facing building as well. But it's not just about the capital building works. So my job as Community Collections and Outreach Archivist is to engage with the communities. So there is no point having this fantastic space in the centre of York if actually no one can come in and enjoy it, and we're not engaging with new people to be able to do that. So this is basically the main focus of my job, really, building a network of community champions. So going out and talking to lots of different community groups and building up a network of people who can champion our service and work with us as we move forward together as a library and archive service. We're also supporting community groups in identifying, managing and using their archive collections. So for those groups that have their own archive collection but genuinely don't know how to start, don't know what to do with their collections, we're going to be providing workshops next year to help them to engage with their archives and actually gain the confidence to get started as well. And we're also exploring new and long-lasting ways of working with groups. Our project is funded for 2 years. So at the end of 2015, what happens? We didn't want all the relationships that we've spent hours and hours and hours building these relationships with these groups, and then we just walk away and leave it. We want to make sure we build it into the way our service moves going forward when we can't fund things anymore as well. So it's all about building a sustainable legacy for our project as well. So how did we actually go about engaging with York's communities? Well, first of all, we were starting from a relatively low base, actually, in York. We'd done no community engagement work at all, so we were pretty much starting from scratch. So when I started this job back in January, we basically decided that the best approach for us is to just go out there and start talking to people, meet with as many contacts that we could build as possible, and just find out things from people. So I went to a variety of meetings. Some were informal group meetings, some were slightly more formal, so parish council meetings, things like that, and also one-on-one meetings with representatives of different community groups as well. And we asked them, what support do you need for your archives? Do you want to keep or deposit your archive? That was an important one because we're not out to build our own empire in York. We're about working with groups and getting them to engage with us. And just really open-ended, how do you want to work with us? That was a really straightforward question that we could respond to in a really meaningful way as well. It was actually quite a challenge for me to go out there and meet all these different people. As a professional archivist, I'd worked in higher education archive services, and also for business archives as well. So I was used to quite a formal way of meeting people and working with people. So used to going into a meeting room where there's a formally printed out agenda and all of this is very, very structured. And all of a sudden, that gets totally broken down. And all of a sudden, you're invited to a cup of tea in someone's living room. You're going to the local pub for a meeting, which is a bit unusual. Or you're standing in a cupboard surrounded by a couple of dusty filing cabinets. So it's totally different. And automatically, you have to adapt your way of working because it's not about just getting things done. It's about building a meaningful relationship with those individuals. So it's a lot of a deeper type of relationship you've got to build with people as well. So in total, so far, I say so far because this process is still ongoing as well, engaged with 111 individuals from 44 different community groups across York. So we're slowly building up the amount of people that have an awareness of the service and actually want to work with us in lots of different and quite dynamic ways as well. So what did we discover from doing this? We discovered, first of all, that there is an overwhelming support for our project. We didn't necessarily know how popular we would be. We were a relatively unknown service before, and all of a sudden we're going out and talking to people. We didn't know how people would react to that. So all the 44 groups we met with have become basically our archive champions. So they are the people who front their organisations that can basically disseminate information right the way across to all different types of people that they work with. So an absolutely fantastic result, and we anticipate that number is going to continue to grow throughout 2015 as well. Interestingly, our initial activity plan from the Heritage Lottery Fund said that we were to deliver a certain number of archive training workshops. Actually, from discussing things with community groups and finding out what the demand was, we found out that actually there was less demand. People didn't necessarily need as much hands-on training in archives as probably we anticipated. And actually, it's all about adapting and changing. So we actually decided, okay, well, if the demand isn't there, we're not going to force it on people. We're just going to reel that one in and do a little bit less of that activity, being totally flexible with it. But there was unexpected demand for innovative projects. Now, this was not part of the bid at all, but this has become something that has actually grown out of the different discussions we've had with people. So people do want to work with us in collaboration, and we're quite happy to have that entirely driven by the groups we're working with. So yes, we did find out that our approach is in fact successful. But I'm not here just to tell you how great we are, which I can do as well. But we were successful, but it's what we learnt along the way and what we're continuing to learn, not just from our individual perspective, but actually what we can teach the rest of the sector and beyond that as well. And the way in which I'm going to do that is I'm going to talk about the various pilot projects that emerged throughout the project so far. And actually, because we learned something different from every single one of those projects that we ran as well. So the first one, from our lessons learned, is actually really, really straightforward and basic. Just listen to new ideas. So we did a project with Lord Derrimore's primary school, which is a primary school in York, and they came to us and said they wanted to base their entire school's curriculum for 2014-15 around the history of their school and the history of their local community. And we jumped on this because we'd never done any work with schools before, and they said they wanted a chronological resource of the history of their school that their teachers could then interpret into classroom activities. So we recruited 3 volunteers to go and research at the school. The school has its own archive as well. They've carefully preserved over the years. So the volunteers worked with that, and they actually put over 150 hours into the project and created a resource that is 17,000 words long. So they got very into the project. But actually, the school were absolutely thrilled with what they've done, and they've started implementing that information into their school curriculum. So much so that they have now dug a World War I trench in their school playing field. And they're planning a whole host of First World War activities throughout the year as well to tie in with the history of their local school as well. And that's had fantastic benefits for us as a service because we're now working with a school. We're starting a schools programme over the coming months. And now we've got a fantastic base with this school that we can drive forward as well. And the school have got something absolutely fantastic out of it. So again, listening has been a fantastic lesson that we've learnt. We've also learnt to be responsive and act quite quickly when it comes to projects that people are interested in. A representative of the Normandy Veterans Association York branch came to us and was concerned because there are only 7 veterans left in York, Normandy veterans, that are a member of this association, and they're all in their mid-90s, and they all have various different health problems as well. And there was a concern about what's going to happen to the archives of the individual veterans and the memories that they have as well. So we had to act quite quickly before all of this information passes out of living memory. So we very, very quickly recruited 2 volunteers from the University of York who basically went round with this representative and met with the different veterans, recorded their memories and collaboratively catalogued their archives. All of that material is then going to be deposited with us next year. So from initial project discussion to actually acting on a project, we're looking at a turnaround of just under 3 months of actually having that discussion to implementing it. And actually being responsive, it's appreciated massively by the groups that we're working with. And it also means that when time is of the essence, you can work very, very quickly and turn things around. And this project's had quite a lot of media coverage. A lot of people are very, very interested. And actually the veterans themselves learnt so much and have enjoyed the process, which in many ways is one of the most important things about doing any type of community engagement. This is an interesting one. We learned to actually be transparent and clear with groups. We did a pop-up banner exhibition with York's Alternative History Group. And this is by nature, York's Alternative History Group has a very alternative view on what history is. So it can be quite controversial as well in some of the opinions that they express. Now, we as a public library and archive service have to remain neutral. We can't express the same level of opinions that they have. So actually, when we had a member of our staff meet with a member of the history group to actually go through and come up with content, there was a bit of a negotiation process that had to go on actually as to what we could include and what we couldn't include in a public exhibition. But being quite clear from the offset where we stand as an organisation versus their aims and objectives is quite an important one. But there will always be times when there are groups that you're working with that don't fit the same aims and objectives as you. And there'll always be a slight negotiation process that you'll have to go through as part of that as well. But the banner exhibition was a success, and we ended up including information on some of the papers we have on conscientious objectors. And that in itself was quite a controversial thing. But actually it sits in that middle ground that it's factual, it's something that relates to our archive, but it also does express a slightly different slant on the war as well, so fits with some of their alternative history aims as well. So yeah, transparency was a very clear one for us. We also learnt to compromise and be flexible. As archivists, most of us, maybe not all of us, have a very strong idea of what best practice should be when you come to build an archive. Not everyone can build an archive standard Strongroom. If you've got a spare million, maybe. Most people can't. And for many community groups, that's exactly the problem that they face. So when a parish council in York came to us and said that they'd identified a shed or outbuilding in their local community that they wanted to turn into their community archive, we kind of went with the idea and see what happened. So they decided that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to keep it on site. So we provided them with storage guidance, kind of pulled together from all different sources, gave it to them, and that was the results that they came up with. So to move it from basically a dumping ground into an actual community archive was quite a big step for them as well. It cost them £685 to do, so it was kind of within a budget for them. And it's probably not going to pass any proper archive conditions, but it's a clean, dry space where they can store their archives. And actually, we've got a fantastic relationship with this parish council now. And we know about their archive, and they know how they can come to us if they have any problems or challenges. So actually, being flexible with our own professional opinions has been very, very important. And I think that this group in particular are much more willing to do more work with us and see us as a very approachable organisation, whereas before there's always going to be that barrier between the organisation and the community as well. So it was compromising, and flexibility was a really, really key one for us. And finally, from our lessons learned is use your community spaces. We're lucky, we're part of a library and archive service that has a network of branch libraries right the way across the city. And I'd never worked in part of a library service before. So actually realising that you've got all these fantastic branch libraries that are community hubs. They are proper community spaces that people spend a lot of time in, people are known, it's a very local atmosphere as well. So when a local history society approached us and said they wanted to make their archive accessible in that branch library, we went with it because we wanted to find new ways of making archives accessible outside the city centre. So we're going to have a fantastic brand new facility in the centre of town, but in many ways that's just the challenge. It's the centre of town. We're going to have a whole network of branch libraries that are totally unaffected by archives and local history. So by moving in a local archive collection, it's exposing more people to that ability to be able to use archives in that local context as well. So we've just launched that project last week, and the History Society had some fantastic words to say about how much they enjoyed working with us, what they got from the project, and they enjoyed the process. We got them to catalogue their archive themselves, and they've enjoyed every single minute of it. So the enthusiasm and the skills that individual groups can bring is absolutely fantastic. So just to summarise, those are the key things we really think that we've learnt, and this is how we're going to drive our own community engagement forward as well. And I would say never underestimate the value of being that friendly face, being that person that sits in that void between the organisation and the community. I think miscommunication can easily happen when you haven't got somebody that can kind of bridge that gap, and being able to have those discussions is really, really important as well. So that is definitely what we've learnt throughout this process as well. And finally, just to kind of leave you with a few final things about challenging how we do community engagement in the archive sector. Our approach is already the subject of PhD study at the University of York, so we're already forming part of how community engagement is changing and how we're delivering things as we move forward as well. And what we've also done is we've given our Gateway to History project a legacy already. So we're already building lasting relationships that we can take forward. And also, because Explore is now a community-led mutual as a spin-out of the City of York Council, we have a responsibility to the community that's even deeper than it was before. So actually, all the lessons we've learned, we can take forward as we work with communities into the future as well. And just to leave you with a couple of questions, really, to have a think about. Are we over-reliant on case studies presented to us from our own sector? In many ways, you can look at exactly what I presented to you as case studies, but actually it's not necessarily about the projects that we delivered. The projects we delivered are not about the outcomes of the projects in their own right. It's about the relationships and the ongoing work that we've done with people. And it's all about assessing the community landscape, because each area and each city will be very, very different in its demographic and how it works. So it's all about taking the time to go out and talk to those people. And should the archivist seek to behave more flexibly in the community? Now, we obviously think yes, and we believe that actually going out and just talking to people has been fantastically successful for us, and it will be key in working out what your community is like in the different areas as well. I've put questions, but you can ignore that because we'll be doing that later on. But yes, thank you very much.